Good morning and welcome back to the American Warrior Show. This morning I am joined by Mr. Brady Hardin of Nighthawk Custom. Good morning, Brady.
Morning, brother. How you doing?
Good. This is kind of a long time coming, I think.
Uh, I feel sorry for the listeners.
Oh, I think we're going to have a great show, man. I'll go ahead and read your impressive bio, and then we got some questions lined up for you, sir. Brady Hardin is a sponsored professional shooter for Nighthawk Custom and other companies in the firearms industry, competing in USPSA, IDPA, IPSC, and some two gun events on the local, state, regional, and national, international world championship level. He's a very fun loving, personable, and driven young man who is not ashamed of his faith in his Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, nor am I for that matter. I think it's important every show to try to do a statement of faith. So let me say that right now. He has won numerous state, local, and regional events, including winning first master at all but one, his first 2018 of the IDPA National Championships and an IDPA World Championship. He has finished in the top 10 at USPSA Nationals and shot the single stack and limited optics division super squads. He has podium finished at the US IPSC National Championship and represented the United States at the 2025 IPSC Handgun World Shoot in South Africa as the alternate to the classic team. He started his own training company, Elite Performance LLC, in 2023 to help others achieve their goals in shooting and help give back to the shooting community using all of the experience and knowledge others have so graciously poured into him. What a fantastic bio.
Well, it's not much, I don't think, but you know,
Well, you seem to enjoy what you're doing, and that's important.
I reckon so. Sometimes I kind of wonder.
Let's welcome some folks onto the show, Brady. We got Will Rhodes on. He says, "Good morning, Rich and Brady." He's from Missouri, coin number 2269. If you want to become a coin member of our self preservation community, we would love to have you join us and perhaps see you here in Tennessee this fall for the upcoming Warrior Camp. More information to follow on that. James is on from Massachusetts. Alan Kelly is on from Triple Occupied Virginia. Boy, it's getting rough up there. Bruce is on. Mark is on from Australia. Thank you for being on, man. Brady, I know this is really in the kind of the questions I put together for you and sent over to you, but how did you get into the shooting sports?
So I really got into it primarily out of self-defense. So when I turned 19, Alabama dropped their concealed carry permit age down to 18. So I was in college and all the time. So I was like, hey, I want to do this. So I bought a carry gun out of a buy sell bulletin at 19. My parents weren't too happy about that at the time, and got my permit. But my parents took it away for a little while after they found out, because I was still living at home, and not too much time went by after that. My dad was like, well, if you're gonna carry a gun, you need to practice at least like once a month or something. And I said, okay. Well, whenever I was 14, my youth director
Can
and
I
some
ask
other
a
guys.
question, Brady, before we go any further? Were your
Yeah.
parents not gun people?
No, they're gun people. Like I grew up shooting all kinds of stuff and all whenever I was a kid and all, but like it was more of, I was 19. I was still a little bit of a dumb teenager, I guess, maybe in their eyes. I don't know.
Can
But
we talk about that real quick? Do you know what the
yeah.
concept, the legal concept, and John is on? I believe John's an attorney. He's watching us this morning. The age of
Mhm.
majority. Do you know what that term is?
I think I've heard of that some, but I haven't done a
It,
whole lot on it.
yeah, it's another state defines it slightly differently, but for the United States of America, the age of majority means that the point at which you are a legal adult and you're afforded all the rights that every adult American citizen is entitled to. And at 18, brother, that's it. Now that
It's true.
before midnight, you're a 17-year-old child, but on the next morning when you turn 18, you're a full adult with you can do whatever you want. And which is interesting. And I think as parents, just speaking for that, Brady? Are you a parent yet?
No, sir.
Okay, I think that it's difficult for parents to recognize the fact that little Timmy just crossed into manhood, and he is afforded every right, So, and I know that I have 4 children myself, and it's kind of difficult to be like, gotta let him go, man, you know. But I
Yeah,
love your
and I
dad's
think
approach, though, Brady. And then I'll turn it back over to you. I love your dad's approach. Hey, man, if you're gonna do it, son, you gotta train.
yeah, that's right. And yeah, I think so too. But no, so when I was 14, my youth director and some other guys from church and all had gone and done some local IDPA matches. And now this was back whenever like Texas Stars and plate racks and all that stuff was still legal in IDPA. So like I saw some videos of it and I thought it was really cool back then. And I wanted to, go do that. And me being 14, my parents were like, no, you're 14, you're playing sports, like just be a normal kid, you know. But I remembered the shooting competitions. So I called my youth director up and I said, hey, I want to go do one of these. So we went, and my first carry gun or first gun that I bought for a pistol was a Glock 23, a Gen 3, 40 cal, mid size compact. And I went and I did not come in dead last. I think I was like second or third to last. But with the half-second scoring that IDPA used to have, I was, I think, 440 something seconds final time and all for a 6-stage club match.
My gosh,
That's
is that
that's
possible?
pretty awful. Yes, it was very bad. But you have to think too, like I didn't know what the sights were. I didn't know what sight alignment was. I didn't know how to hold the gun. I didn't know how to do anything. I literally just dove headfirst into it. All I
Okay,
knew was safety and just went from there.
good. Yeah, safety is paramount. Um, so from there, that very humble beginnings to, you guys just heard me read Brady's bio. And so that shows you what you can actually do with some training and stuff. So I think now that we got a little bit of context, Brady, let's jump into it. Competition demands speed and rules based engagement. What specific competition habit do you think is most dangerous if blindly applied to real world self defense encounters? Do you have a thought on that?
Well, I would preface it first by saying, I think that if you are a fairly moderately skilled competitive shooter and all, you're going to have a leg up over, your average concealed carry person that either hasn't had any training or maybe has had some formal training but doesn't really actually practice a lot,
Mhm.
you know. Plus, you have to think too about the high speed processing skills that a competitive shooter has. We're able to see and act on things and kind of get things back on track, if the stage plan goes awry or something like that. And the same thing kind of transfers over to real life. But I would say probably something that most people don't think about is um, just your target engagement. Like one of Cooper's 4 rules: know your target and what lies beyond it. Because when you're out there shooting a stage, you've walked your stage, you found where all the targets are, and most of the time the staff has gone through and made sure, hey, there's no shoot throughs or anything to where you're going to hit another target, or you're not going to hit you shouldn't hit a no shoot or something like that that's behind a different target. IDPA matches might be a little different. Um, but out on the street, you don't have that. You don't have time to walk through it. You have to be cognizant of what's in your area and what is going on around you at all times. And that can be difficult if you got a threat out there that you're trying to put your highest focus on at the time too.
I love it, man. I talked to Simon Golub. Do you know Simon?
I just watched that interview. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, he's awesome, man. Um, where I'm going with this is we talked about. I'm really coming to the opinion of, you know, this may sound like, well, duh, Brown, but I think it's important for those because everybody, just like you, Brady, they find this show or they find you. They may not always find you at, man, I want to make GM. I'm gonna go train with Brady, right? So, but they may kind of come to you like brand new, right? And so let me say this very clearly: there are no misses in a self defense shooting. There are none, zero. Every bullet lands somewhere, and it may, hopefully it impacts the ground, maybe it impacts a car, and pray to God it doesn't impact a innocent person. So another thing, the 4 gun handling rules, the way they were taught to me in the Marine Corps back in the late 80s was TANK. Have you heard this acronym before?
I actually haven't. This sounds like
Okay.
something new I'm gonna learn.
Yeah. So T, and I just said it in a class I was teaching down in Florida with Seeklander, and nobody had heard it. I'm like, this is the simplest way to teach these 4 cardinal rules. T, treat all weapons as if they're loaded. A, always keep your finger straight and off the trigger until you're ready to shoot, right? And never point the weapon at anything you don't intend to, destroy, what have you. And then K, know your backstop, foreground, target, and beyond, right? And it's just a interesting little mnemonic that I don't know where it got lost. I thought it was a viable one, and it's one I teach to kids, and they're like, Uncle Rich, I taught him tank. Ask him, ask him, ask him. And it's I don't know. To me, it's easy, but to your point, Brady, and I'll circle back to where I'm going with this, is that understanding that there are targets moving in front of you, behind you. You might be in the mall and there's a glass pane that you can't see what's beyond it because of the glare, but there's something and someone behind it. So I love that. You don't have a match director making sure there's no shoot throughs and that we done pasting everybody's back. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, because like even there's been some stages I've shot before where like you might have a moving target of some kind, and there be a non-threat behind it or right there beside it, and you have to time out your engagement, especially if it's like a runner or something like that, to where it like passes through a few non-threats or something like that, and you have to be really critical on your timing. So like different things like that, can come into play a little bit, I think.
Yeah. There's a guy making these cards, and if you miss the headshot, you got to go and draw a card. Have you heard this?
I think I have.
Yeah. And then
I've heard some different info.
yeah. So it's like, okay, Doug, you missed your headshot. Come grab a card, man. Tell us where the bullet went. It's like, it hit a 1987 Toyota Corolla. Thank God. The next guy misses a headshot. And he's a
I
red
have
on the
heard that.
card. And it's like, oh no. Her name was Susie Stamey. She was a 37-year-old mother of 2, and hit her in the side of the head, and she's going to the hospital. Oh my God. It just kind of puts it in context.
Well, and to that point, whenever I first got started, my first actual class was with Matt Sims and all, and that you would have to hear him tell the stories of all of it, because he tells it with much more, I won't say detail, but more, I guess, his perspective of me back then. And it's pretty comical. But, one thing we were kind of doing towards the end of our session was sitting there and kind of like, that visualization sort of thing that you get whenever you got like you're preparing yourself mentally for a self-defense situation, like, and you're sitting there and it's like, okay, I'm gonna put you in this situation. You've got a threat over here. It's got a hostage. Hostage is your little sister. And she was like, I don't know, 8 at the time or something. And it's like, he's got a knife pressed to her throat. Said you can see a little bit of blood coming out right there. Yeah, that's what I was feeling. I was sitting there, I'm like, and he said, you've got a little dot on target about this size that he put over there. He said, that's your eyeball that you have. All you can see is his eyeball, and the rest of her face is covering his head. Said, you have got to draw your pistol and shoot that right at the exact time that you need to. And he didn't give me an indication on when a timer was going to go off or anything. Hit the timer, draw, bam, shot right in the center of the dot and all. And like, first time doing that too. But, thinking about different stuff like that. And then too, especially like I always think about the interview that y'all did with William April whenever the show first started. Like that, I was, gosh, I think I was in my early 20s whenever that came out. Like, to somebody my age back then, like that is a very eye-opening and very, very good information and knowledge to have. because like, the things he talked about, like if you're at your local laundromat or your local grocery store or something like that, and somebody comes in with an AK, or if you're in church and some active shooter comes in and your family is right there at the front door as soon as the guy comes in, thinking about that kind of stuff and how you would react to it, and feeling your heart rate go up, that adrenaline dump start to happen, and just kind of figuring out how you're going to react to that in that fight or flight.
I love it. Seekleiner, he has, I don't know if he still does it. He used to get these wristbands out at the end of every class and it says, trust your training. And his point was, you can only trust your training if you've really put the reps in, if you've really done the work, then you can just let it run, right? But if you haven't, then it's not, you don't have anything to fall back on. But, like if that happened with you, you're prepared, you're as prepared as any human being walking the planet right now to make that shot and to do it with probably not even an elevated heart rate. It's like going back to my first couple nights as a bouncer, being and I'd been in a lot of fights growing up, but suddenly this is what you do professionally, and the adrenaline, and everything's kind of like time isn't dilating, it feels like it's everything's moving really fast. And then fast forward a couple of years working at multiple different clubs and doing this thing every single night, it's just what you do. It's like a plumber. You just, and to where it's like, okay, it's a no big, and everything moves slower. I feel like I have plenty of time to make a decision. There's only a few things the human body can do. And it's just, I don't know. I think this is things that, let me ask you this. When you listen to the William April thing, what, if anything, did it change about how you mentally prepare for this or how you train for that? Anything, Brady?
Oh, man, that one was probably one of the ones like top 5 that taught me so much in that. But I would say definitely his the big white bag theory, where he's talking about like people
Explain
go
that,
pick
please.
out targets and stuff. So basically his big white bag theory was, related to one of the, I believe it was one of the criminals that he had interrogated and stuff, doing like the kind of the psychology stuff, where he was talking about, a cell is going to pick out their victims based off of what store they come out of, what bag they say they've got. Well, big white bag, Apple store, pricey item, probably pretty well off victim. So picking people like that, or looking at what kind of clothes they're wearing. Are they wearing a Rolex or an Omega or something like that? Are they paying attention when they come out of a store? Are they paying attention before they get out of their car, before they get into their car? All that kind of stuff I've really thought about, and has definitely helped me out a few different instances in picking up on something that could have been a threat had I not paid attention to it. But because I saw them and recognized them, it kind of dismissed them. Um, but then too, thinking about, I believe it was that episode too, where like I was talking about with the visualizing you know, your personal places, like while you're reading your newspaper or something like that. If you read about some armed robbery, visualize that area or that place in your hometown, that you go to all the time. Or even probably the most interesting thing, and I was thinking about this the other day actually, was whenever he was talking to some of those criminals and just learning how they tick and how they work. And that's something that I've kind of carried over like to the competitive side in like diagnosing, because sometimes we'll make an error or for something, whatever it may be. Like if you show up to an IDPA match and you normally shoot USPSA and you're dropping loaded magazines everywhere, or if you're shooting a different division that has a higher round count, but you don't know your round count and stuff as you're shooting the stage, it's like, well, for one, if you don't have that stuff figured out before you get out of the car, and know that, you've already shot yourself in the foot. And same thing if it's self-defense scenario or whatever else too, like, and goes back like we were talking about with missing a target or knowing what's beyond your target, you know, that accountability changes at that point. But I would say on it too, though, but whenever I got into college and what I do for a living, we're talking about like different behaviors and the antecedents that lead to those behaviors and why people make those decisions and stuff. So all of that stuff was sort of happening at the same time. And it really started making me kind of wonder more, like different areas that could be applied to, like whether it's you're meeting somebody new and you pick up on like certain behavior that they have or something and kind of wondering why that is, or, especially in like all of this self-defense stuff, like if there's somebody and they're very nervous, they're looking around a lot, if they're, paying attention to certain things, if they won't look directly at you or something like that, just really honing in on that kind of stuff. Like William really made me pick up on that from a very, because I think I might have been 21 or 20 whenever that came out. So it was very beneficial to young me.
Well, please go back and go back and watch that show. And the late William April, man, our community really suffered a great loss when he passed away. And I think John Hearn has kind of pick up some of the stuff that he was doing, and had John on the show just a couple of weeks ago. Go check that show out if you haven't already. I'll touch on a couple of things that you talked about. Is when I worked in corrections, it was I thought I knew about scumbags working in nightclubs, but then I got a master's degree in it, figuratively just by being around them. Because as a pod officer, you're locked in there with them all day long. And I was in the max security, and then I went over. They're like, Rich, we like what you're doing there in pod 2D. We want you to take it and basically the discipline. We called it the disciplinary segregation pod. Some places call it the shoe or the hole. It's where the people that can't play nice with other inmates, they tend to stab each other. I don't know if you knew that, Brady.
Oh, shocking.
Yeah, so they would send them down there to your old pal, Rich Brown, and we'd sort them out and show them what life is like in the hole. But my point is I would talk to these people like, just like I would talk to you, and basically interview them just like I'm interviewing you, and try to figure out how they think. And they don't think like you and me. They may look like you and me, but they're very reptilian. They can be charming and they can be whatever. And I remember asking one guy, Brady, who's he was in there for purse snatching. And he was part of a large purse snatching ring, and they would go out, they would steal a van, and then they would drive around the malls there in East Tennessee, snatching women's purses around holiday time. And then they get their cards and run up debt and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then you'd like burn the car so they can't find, the van and can't trace you to you. He's like, Officer Brandon, that's ridiculous. What are you talking about? And he's like, pursuant to TCA code, blah, 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 blah. That's an aggravating factor. If I use arson in conjunction with a felony, that's going to add on another XYZ years. And I'm like, this dude had thought it. He had read the Tennessee codes annotated, the criminal codes, and knew. So these people are smart. And he's like, I said, so what do you do? How do you know they're not going to catch you? He's like, well, in our bag, basically they had a criminal bag, right? And he's like, we had all these cans of WD-40. And so before we would jump out, we would just hose everything down with WD-40. And WD-40 is a penetrating oil developed by, he knew all this stuff. He's like, and it would destroy hair, fibers, prints. He goes, Officer Brown, did you know that the fingerprints are really nothing more than amino acids in water, and they consist of yada, yada. These people are smart. I think we need to quit thinking they're idiots. Think of yourself as an adversary. You know what I mean? Brady, you're a very calculating, meticulous. You take your craft seriously, and so does our adversaries. And we got to start thinking that way.
I agree. And that's kind of the thing I've thought about too, like from a competitive side, I've always thought, from a very early time into this that, you know, there's people out there in the world that practice a lot, but they may not go to matches or something like that, you know. And at the time, like the person that I kind of thought this of, you know, that was super duper popular back then, I always thought about like, you know, Max Michelle. You know, I was like, I guarantee you, out there in the world somewhere, there's somebody that is not known that could smash Max Michelle.
Mm.
And like I kind of saw that in real life a little bit with a good friend of mine that passed away. But you know, he's phenomenal 3-gun shooter, but never really like went to matches or anything because he's working all the time. Every time he would go show up to one, all the big sponsored guys, like he would either smoke all of them or he would be right there in them like top 5, you know. And like that's the thing you have to think about when it comes to self-defense is you don't know ahead of time what you're getting into. So what, and it kind of goes back to the discussion that has been had by several people over the years is like, you know, what is good enough? And I don't think that there's ever a point where you can call it good enough. You have to just constantly improve and work on it because, you know, the day that you decide to not work on it or you decide that your skill level is good enough is the day where you're going to need more.
Yeah, your point is incredible. I believe Pat Mitchlick, who was a young a UFC star back in the beginning. I think it was his book. I can't remember the name of it, but he talked about how these fighters would come to train with him, and he would bring in this guy who was a buddy of his, who was just a farmer, but he had been a Division I wrestler back in the day, and he would come in and just wreck these dudes. And I'm like, who's this guy? And I'm like, oh, that's Steve. And Steve would put on his overalls and see you fellas, and head out the back door. And they're like, why is he not in the UFC? It's like, he's a farmer. No. And he would come in and it mentally destroyed these guys. Like, I can't believe there's a man like this walking around that's not a multi-million-dollar athlete. But to your point, Brady, they're out there.
They are. And like I got a buddy that works for one of the police units that's over in Birmingham, and he's been talking with us guys and stuff. He wants me to come in and kind of simulate being the bad guy and offer some of their force on force training. I'm like, I would love that. Like, let's go. Like, that'd be a good trainer for me.
Dude, okay, so I'm going to tell a story. It's an embarrassing story, but I'll make it as quick as possible. So I'm
Okay.
at the end of the police academy. The final culminating event is you and your partner, and you have to drive around and go to these like warehouses and these scenarios, right? So you're in a car, you're answering calls for service, and there's scenarios dreamed up by the academy. So the first one we get, and we got blue guns, right? So there's no risk of anybody getting hurt. And the first one is, and we're in Tennessee, so it's like, hey, there's a missing little girl. She's wandered off and she's in the woods. So can you go help find them? So me and my partner roll up, and there's 2 guys dressed in overalls, and one of them's got a shotgun. Well, we're out here hunting, and he's got the breech open, and he's like, this one dude, he's really short. I mean, I'm only 5'9", but he's probably 5'5", and he's like, hey, fellers, just real, how you doing? And he gets a little close to me. I'm like, hey, brother, kind of back up. And he's like, is that one of them Glocks? You got one of them Tupperware guns? And before I know it, he had snatched my gun.
Oh, really?
I mean, I see my gun pointing at me, and I'm like, oh, I have one just like that. That's the first thing my brain said. He's got a Glock like I do. Of course, it was a blue gun, but and I go, my partner draw down on him, and then after they index the whole scene and we kind of debriefed it, they're like, this guy's a 4th degree black belt. That's all he does. We hire him to come in here and take guns away from people. He's a master at it. But I'd underestimate him because he looked like a freaking hick. So I think we've beat that horse to death, but those people are out there, Brady, and I really hope you get to do that because you will open the eyes of a lot of officers and you will save a lot of people, because I never let, after that, that's what the academy should do. Let a young Rich Brown get embarrassed get humbled, so that when I'm out on the street, man, I never make that mistake again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And like that's kind of the thing I hope for too, because like for myself, like I think it would be some good experience for me to get to do some force on force stuff with those guys and all. But like, yeah, like I said before, like I've had a lot of people help me in this, and like if there's something that I can do just by coming and doing that kind of stuff with some people, especially some people that are just starting out, or even like your ESU guys, like I'd love to do that. Because you think about it too, like yes, what everybody knows me for is like being a competitive shooter, but I have so much more like, you know, with Matt being my mentor, like
Mm-hmm.
I've got a plethora of stuff that he's taught me. Like I know room clearing, I know how to fight in and around vehicles, I know how to use a shotgun in defensive scenarios, especially with riots or something like that. I know how to use
Mm-hmm.
a rifle in close quarters. Like I've got a lot of other valuable tools that I can take and use in those environments. And especially, like that's something too that I don't think a whole lot of your different sort of um, tactical officers or military guys would have a whole lot of exposure to, is having somebody that they're going and doing force on force with have those kind of skills too that they
Mm-hmm.
use in conjunction against them.
No, that's solid. And Matt's a good dude. I've had him on the show before. Matt Sims. Go back and check that out. Brady, you've won at the highest levels, man. What 3 daily dry fire or even mental rehearsal drills from your routine give you the biggest returns when you think about civilian preparing for a sudden violent attack?
I would say just in terms of dry fire, um, I would say first off, you need to prioritize movement. You know, that get off the X sort of thing, because movement is probably the most valuable thing, in real life that can save your life. Standing there like a knot on a log and taking the time to realize what's going on, or just trying to stand there and draw your gun first and then move, it could potentially get you killed, you know.
Mhm.
But always definitely prioritize that movement first. But work your draw and stuff into it, work those presentations, after like, and I'm not talking about just, casual, movement. I'm talking about hard movement, like explosive, get out of there, but working on that kind of stuff, working on your target presentations in terms of, being in awkward positions, because especially after you've done that movement, if you can do movement, you might not be in the best shooting position.
Mhm.
So working on some awkward position to where, your body may be kind of contorted, or you need to spin your body around somehow, or you might have to shoot with one hand, you know,
Mhm.
kind of thinking about those sort of things and putting yourself in some of those different scenarios to where you're going to be more prepared for whatever situation you might face. But then too, just picking the gun up daily, because I'm sure you've probably heard, as many people have, like the argument people have about, if they've got a red dot on their gun now. People are big about closed emitters. And the biggest thing that people say about closed emitters is the dust on the lens from carrying it, or the
Mhm.
rain. I was like, okay, well, back up. If you're talking dust on the lens, you're not handling your gun. You're not checking to make sure that dot is still on. It's like, if you would actually pick up and handle your gun every day, that's not going to be a problem for you.
Mhm.
Because like whenever I put all of my stuff on first thing in the morning, first thing I put on is my belt, and then I put on my gun. And then like I've literally walked out of the house several times and left my cell phone or my wallet or something else here, but I've not left my gun. you know.
Mhm.
But after I put it on, like, I'll might be standing around in the kitchen or something like that, and might just sit there and kind of work some presentations or something, do some of that movement and kind of hit some of that air, but kind of getting those daily reps in, is especially important before you head out for the day.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Mentally, Seeklander has a mantra. Um, I hope he doesn't mind me giving it away. Grip the gun, see the sights, be aggressive is kind of his pre-stage mental preparedness. Do you have something like that, Brady?
I do a little bit, and I was going to kind of touch on it some there whenever we're talking about the dry fire stuff, and that's kind of what I was going to say too, that we've already gone into pretty good detail about is, that mental side of things and those mental cues, and that visualization, like that can be some of the most paramount stuff that can, you know, save you in a sense if you've been slacking on your work a little bit, but also
Mhm.
can help whenever you have been doing the work that you can always call upon it and it be there to help you out. Um, but for me, for the competitive side of stuff, like it's changed and it's evolved a lot over the years. And it specifically kind of stayed around, whatever I've been struggling with at the time. But where I've kind of settled at now has been more of, more sort of focused around vision, because um, the thing that I have always struggled with is speed. And
Mm.
like I was talking about that first IDPA match, and all for half of that 440 something seconds was 220 something seconds worth of just flat raw time. So I was
Mm.
slow. I was very slow. I'm still a little slow, but I'm not near as slow as what I used to be. Um, but in that, feeling slow sometimes can inhibit your perception of speed.
Mm.
So most of the time, I've noticed like whenever you're seeing target and sights and all that, you might be shooting and it feels just incredibly slow. Like you're seeing the gun lift, you're seeing the sights return on target, you're firing the next shot, you're leaving the target as soon as you've broke the shot and all of that sort of stuff. And then you get there and you look at the time and you're like, man, that was a really fast time. I was like, yeah, that was the hottest time on the stage that we've had for the match so far. I was like,
Mhm.
and really that has kind of been the thing that's helped me the most in just just see what you need to see and all like and you know depending on the stage or what the targets are that are available in the stage, that can differ,
Mhm.
you know but
Can you go
always
back to
letting
that
your
phrase? I think people, you said it so breezily, and I think a lot of people don't understand. There's a lot wrapped up in what you just said. See what you
there
need to
is
see. So, I mean,
and
we could do an hour show on just see what you need to see, but break that down for us because I love that phrase.
so see what you need to see means, see what you need to see between the gun, the sights, the target, and whatever the target difficulty is. So you need to break down, whatever your acceptable level of sight alignment is. I shoot iron sights most of the time. Most of the time, or sometimes I shoot a dye. Primarily whenever I shoot target focused. But depending on the level of difficulty of the target, meaning the distance, if it's a partial target, whatever the case may be, there might need to be less of side alignment to target ratio that I need to see. Like
Mhm.
a if it's a target that's at 2 yards, well, basically all I have to do is stick my arm out because my arms are so long, and I pretty much am touching the target. So, am I going to actually look at the sights on that? No, I'm literally going to put my gun in the middle of the available high scoring area and pull the trigger however many times I need to. But then, if it's a 30-yard tux target, I'm going to be honed in a whole lot more on the imprint of the A in the center of the A zone, and I'm going to be
Mhm.
stacking my shots all around that as tight as I can, because I don't want to have any sort of wobble, especially side to side if it's that type of target. Um, but then to your vision sometimes or your mind will play tricks on you in telling you that what you just saw is either, you know, you didn't quite perceive it as for what it actually is, or your perception of it is wrong, and that kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the speed aspect of it. When you're seeing things in real time and you've spent all the time, like I have, and so many others have spent, where you're trying to speed up your vision and your processing skills, you're going to get to the point to where it seems like everything's happening in slow motion, pretty much. And that's not because it actually is. It's just because you're used to seeing at such a higher rate of speed that it just feels super duper slow. So having the visual patience to sit back and recognize, I'm seeing everything that I need to see when I'm engaging this target with whatever difficulty it is. And I am guaranteeing, I'm getting hits on the target that I need to, then that is perfectly acceptable. And I'm not having any wasted time in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that translates back over to what we were talking about earlier with the accountability for shots and stuff, taking from the competition side to knowing like what your target and what lies beyond it, out in the real world. Your vision and your processing speed comes into the real world environment like paramount, especially with that shot accountability in there, like, and there's all the discussions people have had about, is, if you're going fast and you're missing or something like that in a controlled environment, obviously, that's a bad habit. I'm like, well, not necessarily, you know, like most things or most answers to most questions, it depends on the scenario. Um, but, you know, when you're training speed and to get faster, you have to accept that you're gonna fall off the rails and you're probably gonna crash and burn hard sometimes, and that's fine. But you have to reel it back in and you have to find that point of where you slid off the rails at. Once you find that point, you're kind of working back and forth between, what's comfortable, what can I do consistently and repeatedly every single time. And then you're going to be along the lines of, okay, what can I do kind of inconsistently? Can I, get this faster time in there, but my hit's going to suffer a little bit, you know? And then at what point am I just completely out of control? So figuring out those different points and how to continuously just increase all of those really, really helps, especially in that self-defense environment. And like what I was talking about earlier with, like shot accountability sort of thing. Because if you know visually what you need to see to hit a target, regardless of the target difficulty and what it is, then you should be able to execute that every time. And like what you said before with that Mike talks about, if you've prepared properly, you're going to be able to fall back on that training every single time.
Yeah. And Mike also says it relative to see what you need to see. So Brady just gave us a few minutes of unpacking that phrase, but Mike says, your sights are your speedometer. And I love that too. If the sights aren't there, then it's going to slow you down a little bit. So, but I want to go back to the thing about movement too, because you're so accurate on that. I went out to train with Mike one time in Oklahoma. He was getting ready for the nationals, and it was Team Wilson Combat was there. And I think we did a 3-hour training session in the hot Oklahoma sun. And it was just offline movement, just boom, step. And by the time I got in the truck, my hips were shot. And I'm like, oh, no wonder you had hip surgery, bro. This is insane. But in order to move at that level, that's the kind of stuff that these competitive shooters are doing.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is like, you've got various different start positions and all, and like IPSC especially, like IPSC is going to have a spot to where you have your feet touching and you have to stand completely perfectly erect pretty much. And like you have to have your hands relaxed at your sides and all of that stuff. Like you can't do wrist below belt or anything like, USPSA or IDPA might do. But you have to be able to get moving and get moving quickly with authority in that. So really making that prominent is something that's going to be beneficial in regardless of what environment that you're in, if it's on a competitive field or if it's out in the real world.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Let's take it back to your faith for just a moment. Under extreme time pressure, faith matters. Faith matters all the time, whether it's a time pressure for an event or a time pressure for a real world encounter. How, if at all, does your faith influence the split second ethical decision making around using lethal force or even coping with it afterwards? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's definitely a extremely deep topic,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of different avenues people can go down on it. But, kind of what I've looked at over the years is, God defines, and I mean, it's one of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. But, like in Genesis, it's talking about how, um, if someone sheds the blood of man and all, then, and God made man in his image, then kind of getting into that, that's not something that you need to be doing. And then you get on to like different places, like Exodus, for example, where it's talking about, if thief comes in the night and, there's paraphrasing here, of course, but, basically there's no remorse for that bloodshed there, if it comes in the middle of the night. But if it comes during the daytime, then there can be some, action based on that, and I kind of allude that to, I think that, you know, there's different places in the Bible and that God definitely wants us to protect those whenever trouble comes our way.
Hmm.
I mean, there's the scripture that talks about, an eye for an eye or tooth for tooth and all that, or turn if he um I just lost my train of thought, sorry. if if brother, uh slaps your left cheek and all, also turn to him the right and all that. But I think that God, understands that there's evil out there in the world and that we
Hmm.
need to protect ourselves. We need to protect others from that evil. And
Hmm.
I believe that, fully that is justifiable and all that. And God's not going to ridicule us for that either. We've got the legal aspect of that down here on earth,
Hmm.
but, if you're not just killing somebody just to kill them for the sake of it, I don't think that there's going to be any type of remorse or anything like that unless you get to heaven for it.
I agree.
But then, yeah. But then on the aftermath side of that, like kind of like I said a while ago, it depends on the situation, but ultimately, like it goes back to mindset. You know, when you think about it, if you are defending, I'll go back to the scenario I was talking about earlier that, like my little sister and all, like
Yeah.
that little visualized scenario. So, like, if I'm sitting there in that aftermath of that particular situation, then the first thing going through my mind is obviously going to be, oh my gosh, thank you, Lord. I made that shot. She's okay. She's bleeding a little bit, but she's going to live. She's going to be fine. And this scumbag is not,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but like, that's going to be your first thought in that. And then you might have some questions that come after that, especially like, if you've got cops coming around asking you questions, trying to get the store, if you've got legal counsel or something that's going to start asking you questions, then you might have some doubts start to slip in there, but you have to hold true to, what actually happened. And, you know, from a legal standpoint, if you're justified in doing whatever you had to do, then you're golden in that, I think. And then two, I don't, I can't remember. It was some episode, but I remember it to this day because it's such a good nugget. There's one guest that y'all had on one time that he got called into court a lot for to be an expert, sir, subject matter expert,
Hmm.
but said one of the shootings or something that he may have been involved in at the time, they went on for like a week or more, like, picking apart every detail. It's like, well, you could have done this, you could have done that, blah, blah, blah. Well, they get to the verdict of it and they were asking for closing remarks. And he said, you know, we spent all this time analyzing every single possible detail that I could have done in this for a week. I had 2 seconds
Yeah.
to make a decision. I I think that is something that, once you point that out to, you know, a jury or a courtroom, like that's a valuable piece of information to consider that I think may get swept under the rug more times than not.
Oh, you're spot on. And I think that's going back to, stage planning. You will probably run a stage mentally, I don't know, two dozen times. I don't know what it is, but I guarantee it's not like you just, all right, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. Like, no. It's the same thing like William April said, read the newspaper, put yourself in that position, literally. Like, if it was near, like we have a large bakery here in town, and Flowers Bakery, and when they're baking, it smells amazing, right? I mean, for miles, right?
Yeah.
So if I was reading the newspaper and I see that there was a shooting or an attack or an assault or something near Flowers Bakery in the newspaper, I'm going to close my eyes and visualize. I'm going to smell that baking bread. I'm going to feel the gravel under my feet, the light breeze on my face. I'm going to walk through every detail of it mentally. And when you do that and you do that and you do that and you do that and do that, and then when finally it comes around, you've already made where your lines in the sand are. Like, I will not do that. You will not. And these are things that are just, I'm going to draw my gun and I'm going to do what I've got to do. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not going to flinch or freeze. These are pre-scripted things that are just going to happen.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And you hit on something there that kind of made me think about one. With walking through and doing stage plans and all that stuff. And I found a little bit of this can translate over to real life too. The first nationals that I won first master in back in 21. I was shooting on the super squad at IDPA Nationals, and it was myself, Mike was on there, Rob Latham, Matt Sims, JJ Rakaza, Nils Johnson, and there's a handful of others and all. But I remember we were either at the end of the first day or the second day, and there's a stage that we got onto. IDPA does like 2 stages to a bay for nationals typically. Well, this is a really kind of a quick, fast, compact sort of a stage and all, and it had some little quirks to it. Well, everybody's like in the gigantic huddle trying to get through this tiny little area and stuff and figure out a plan real quick. And I remember, Rob and I are both shooting CDP. And I was asking Rob, I was like, what are you thinking about this? It's like, I've got like 3 or 4 different engagements in mind. It's like, I don't really know what I want to do. And he said, all I need is a plan. It doesn't have to be the best plan, but I just need a plan. Said, and that's, he kind of taught me then, it doesn't matter if you have the perfect plan or not. A well executed plan is going to be much better than a poorly planned, perfect stage plan, I guess you call it. But that's kind of what I've learned too in going into the real world with this stuff. You don't have to execute everything perfectly to a T. As long as you can execute, most times that's all you need.
I agree with you, man. I say this damn near every day. Great is the enemy of good. A good plan violently executed right now is better than the perfect plan 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now, because guess what? There's going to be variables that you cannot foresee. Like, I can't do it till it's perfect. Well, guess what, Sherlock? It ain't going to happen. It's because life gets in the way. The minute you think you got a perfect plan and you're ready to execute, the market change. Let's say if you're a real estate agent or you're whatever, everything changes. So just get going, and attack.
That's right.
I don't understand why more people don't get that. I cannot stand hearing people say, I'm a perfectionist. No, you're not. You're opinionated. You like things the way that you like them. No, my house is perfect. Wipe the counter. Really? Now what's that in the floor over there? I really, you hear this kind of stuff from people and it just doesn't make sense to me. So to his point, like later on in the day, somebody may figure out a better way to shoot that stage and it's going to shave off, 0.2 of a second. Fantastic. Great. I gave it the best run I had with the plan I had at that time. And that's what it is. But let's.
It's absolutely
I got
right.
another question for you here, Brady.
All right,
Uh,
let's go.
Concealed carry often means shooting from awkward positions. Working with clothing that you're wearing that day, equipment, all these carry choices that people have. Is anything in your competition experience kind of modified the way that you concealed carry, going back all the way back to when you were a 19-year-old starting this lifestyle?
Yes, a
Ooh,
lot, and it still constantly evolves.
wow.
So I just in terms of gear and all, used to whenever I first started carrying that little Glock 23 that I bought at the time, came with a alien gear holster, Kydex outer shell, leather interior, not the greatest sort of thing. Well, like they're meant to carry like, kind of strong side and all. Well, very early on, it was I'd kind of got to thinking more about stuff and get to thinking about those different situations and pay attention to other people as they're carrying, well, like you go walk into a bathroom somewhere and somebody's standing there going to the bathroom and you're like, dude's open carrying and all, especially if they're carrying in the small of their back, like, what's to stop somebody from going in there, taking their gun and just shooting them in the back right there, you know? So I got to thinking about that. I was like, how can I better carry my gun to where if somebody sees it and they try to fight me to get it or get control of it, where I can have the most control over it, and
Hmm.
ultimately appendix carry is the answer for that. Because if I'm having to fight somebody for control of my gun, if it's on my hip, I'm already in a super awkward position trying to fight them, especially if they're behind me, you know, and I'm trying to get to where I'm facing them. Or
Yeah.
especially if you've got the small of your back, like you're doomed at that
Yeah.
point, honestly. Um, but appendix carry, like I can put my arms over this. I can sit here if there's multiple people, and obviously this is not the thing to do, but if you end up on the ground or something like that, I mean, worst comes to worst, you can huddle up in a ball and then finagle your draw out and use it however you need to from there, but you're staying protected the whole time. Um, but so appendix carry is kind of where I've lived ever since then and all. But then too, just from and Gabe Suarez talks about it a lot, being the not the fastest draw, but the most well timed draw, having that slow movement in those hands to where, you're drawing at the right time, especially if, you whoever's there is kind of paying attention to what's going on in the background,
Hmm.
kind of not drawing attention to yourself in it. Um, stuff like that. But something I would say too is I forgot where I was going with that. that's the that's one thing I've learned is I'm realistically mentally I'm probably like 92 with dementia. Sometimes I forget where I'm going with stuff.
I was going to say, wait till you're
Um,
my age, Brady. It gets worse.
I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. Um,
Can I help you out there? I got something on that.
yeah.
Uh, On my friend John Correa over at Active Self Protection, he does the video breakdowns of all these shootings. I would have never guessed until the video evidence was out there that surreptitious draw process was a thing. And
Mhm.
you see it all the time turn the tables, whether it's the bad guy, he's moving amongst people, robbing them, and that gives the good guy time and space and some concealment moving behind somebody as he draws to fire. That's something that I had never ever thought of and never trained, certainly, but that is a thing. And again, if you are carrying in an awkward position and you got to make that move like this move only does one thing. Nobody,
Mhm.
if you're listening to the podcast later, I'm drawing a gun from the say the 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock position. When my elbow goes 90 degrees, I'm not drawing flowers. There's
Right.
nothing good coming. So like in the little combatives class we do here, anytime you see that, it's Kimura City. Just go flying in and bang out a Kimura, because you got to do something. There's nothing good coming. You're bumping chest and somebody's yelling at you and they do this, go. Don't wait. You can't make space. I don't know if he's drawing a knife, he's drawing a gun. It doesn't matter. You need to take control of that arm fast.
That's right.
And drawing a firearm in that moment, you're behind the curve. Whatever's coming out, you can't beat it. If you're within 3 meters of it, you might as well move in and gain custody of them. So I think to your point, my good friend Cecil Birch, over one part of the Shivworks Collective, Immediate Action Combatives. Love that dude. Trained with him a lot. But he's like, I'm kind of agnostic on placement, where you carry the gun. And I understand what he's saying, but I'm with you. I've professionally, where as a Marine and as a police officer, I did have to carry in the 3-ish o'clock position. But as soon as I got out of my duty gear, going back to 1992, it was always appendix. Back when we didn't call it, there was no such thing as appendix. It was felony carry, Mexican carry, that's just what we called it back then.
Right.
But I agree with you. That's the only way I'm going to be able to maintain custody of my firearm, and even sitting in a car. That I don't know how people do it with that small of the back, man. That just, ugh.
Yeah, it's super uncomfortable. But yeah, like that's kind of the thing too. And like I've made the point to a few people and all, because like if I teach a class or something like that, and if somebody wants it to be more concealed carry based or something, I'm not certified to be a tactician by any means, so I don't like teach tactics necessarily. But like what I will go through and talk about will be like just different things to think about in terms of, depending on like if you're in a situation where you're kind of more hands to hands with somebody, and that it's definitely not a time to you do want to introduce a gun into that environment, because for one, if you lose control of it, then you're just setting yourself up for failure there. But two, like, what if you're in a situation where you're using your dominant hand to hold somebody off, and like you've been fighting with them for so long, and like you can feel yourself just getting exhausted, and like you've got to do something to get them off of you? Well, like most people, they might try to like switch to their left hand or something, get weird, or like hold them off. But like, well, why don't you draw the gun with your left hand?
Yeah.
Like that's something that can easily be done if you're carrying an appendix, because all you have to do is just roll your hand around, draw the gun out, and bam, you're right there. But
Can we talk about that real quick? Because I just had on retired DevGru operator Bill Rapier. If you haven't listened to that show, I've done 2 shows with him now. Fantastic, good Christian man as well. And I asked him a question, something like, what's the elite skill that a lot of people don't do? And he said that right there. Drawing with your non-dominant hand is something that people need to be training on. And I'm like, yeah, I don't work much with that. But it is important, because I'll tell you, as a close combat instructor in the Marine Corps, we operated on what's called the extended limb theory. You extend a limb to me, I don't care if it's your leg, your arm, something gets extended to me. That's what I'm waiting for. You know what I mean? And so again, you extend the right hand, and you're a right-handed person, you just got arm dragged into a shooting position, and I'm gonna shoot you in the pelvis, and it's gonna be bad. But I mean, that's and again, if you're carrying a gun, I think you need to be training for the entanglement, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And like that's one thing too. Like I haven't done a whole lot of training like around that sort of stuff, but like Craig Douglas and like the Shivworks sort of thing, like that really piques my interest. Because that seems like something that would be pretty beneficial to me. And then like there's a BJJ place down the road and stuff that I know a few guys that train at, and I thought about going and doing some of that too. But
And here's the thing, Brady, I think you should. And what you need to do is drag their asses out to the range.
Yeah,
you teach them, let them teach you for free, and you give them some pointers. That's what my good friend Cody Hudson has done. Cody is my BJJ coach, and he has got a lot of the shooters to come grapple with him, and they're getting to be really good. Some GMs that are choking people out, and vice versa, and some grapplers getting into the shooting sports. I think that's great, because back in the day it was very siloed. grapplers never shot, shooters never grappled, and vice versa. And the edge weapons dudes, that's all they did was play with sticks and knives. And we're getting to a point where, and I love it, it's this integrated combatives. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that was something else I was going to kind of hit on there. I don't remember exactly where I was going to go with it. Shoot, it'll come to me later. But no, going back to your question though about things that's kind of helped me, and as far as adapting for concealed carry, I would definitely say like that visualization sort of stuff, like we talked about before. That is a huge one in that. But dang, I really wish I could remember what I was going to say because it was a really good point.
Nothing like live
I,
TV. Well, I got a
I
question for you.
know,
Maybe it'll
right?
jog your memory.
Okay.
And the question is, man, so if I'm saying, hey, Brady, I want you to design a 4-hour course, it's basically taking what you know as far as a competitor and then putting it into the CCW community. What, if any, modules would you insist on including? Like, okay, Rich, if we're going to do that for your guys, you're giving me 4 hours. These are the modules that we need to include in it, and why would you insist on those things, whatever those things are?
I would say first and foremost, in which granted, obviously all this stuff, you put in whatever order and sprinkle it out however you want to make it flow the best. Mindset needs to be a huge part of it because, like we've talked about at length already, mindset is such a crucial part on the competition field of, you've got your self-image and all of that sort of stuff that plays into it, but knowing how you perform under pressure and being confident in your skills and being able to just call on those at any given time and execute, having the right mindset and knowing everything about yourself in those kind of scenarios is going to be a huge help to you. Um, then the other one I would say along that is you definitely need to talk about movement. Like I said, if you're talking just self-defense, you know, movement, like we said before, that could be the thing that saves your life right then and there, depending on what the scenario is. But talking about that dynamic movement, because, most of the time something happens, you're not going to be in that athletic stance ready to break off at any given moment. You're going to have to get moving and get moving quick. But talking about that and the different applications that go with it, then, I would say you need to talk about the uncommon things, prepare for adversity. Um, really thinking about the random off the wall things that could happen, and preparing for those things, whether it be an awkward shooting position, like if you're having to lay prone on the ground and shoot underneath a car or something like that. Or if you're sitting in a car and you're boxed into traffic and somebody comes up and they start mowing people down as they're sitting there in their car, like there's all kinds of different stuff and different scenarios that you could think of. But kind of putting a little bit of forethought into that and just get their gears turning on it, and think of how you would respond to those different things. Would be something to have in there. But then too, I think that in terms of all of the skills you need, you could capture the majority of those in those three buckets. But I would say the last one that you need to have in there is gear and equipment, because there needs to be a small portion in there for that. Because when you're talking about self-defense type stuff, for one, the most crucial point is it has to work, and it has to work for you. Because most of the time, if somebody is new to concealed carry, and especially like females get taken advantage of most of the time if they go into a gun shop and they don't have any guidance or anything like that, um, or like older people too that don't know a whole lot about guns. They might get talked into the guy behind the counter into like some stuff known as revolver like a super duper compact, lightweight 9mm that hurts when you shoot it or something, um, making people understand that they need to figure out what they like the best. That'll be something that they'll actually carry, that they'll actually train with, and that
Mm-hmm.
will work. It doesn't matter what it is necessarily, as long as you're comfortable with it and that it works. Like, those are the two most important things that will save your life, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of gear and equipment. But then too, like, in that, wrap up that you've got to just continually train and seek out more training. But, also, there's a lot of people have talked about before, like, vetting different instructors or kind of being careful who you're associated with in terms of training and all that. Like, my sort of what I've kind of abided by in that is, if there's something that is fundamentally sound, explore it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if there's something that kind of goes against the fundamentals, like, be cautious, you know, but prove it out, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but I I would say that, you once you get down into like the very fine details of every one of those, you could probably have a pretty good competition to concealed carry class out of that and really kind of relate a lot of the skills that carry over from competition to concealed carry.
Mhm. No, I think it's excellent. To touch on a couple things, and then I'm going to ask you to clarify one.
Okay.
When Mike came up with that thing, REAP, when you talk about evaluating a handgun for yourself, R being reliability, E ergonomics, and I see it all the time. Ma'am, why are you running that handgun? Well, the guy in the gun store said, and she's 90-pound, 80-year-old female in one of my classes, and she could not do the thumb safety on this 1911 that they had sold her. It's like, what are you doing? So, ergonomics. Does it feel good in your hand? Number one, of course, a lot of people, that's the end all thing. It just points good for me. Okay, great. And that's a thing. I get it. But can you actuate all the things on it? And then accuracy. Is it an accurate firearm? And then finally, kind of P would be power. Like, it'd be great to carry a 10 millimeter everywhere, but it's a lot of gun. It's a lot of gun to handle. And P, it really is two things. It's portability also. Can you conceal it? But so if you've never heard of REAP, then use that to help evaluate the next time you're in that gun store and somebody's trying to sell you some crap you don't need. Mindset, Brady. How do you teach that? Because that's always been something that people say it, and I don't know what they mean by that. I don't want to assume. What do you mean by that?
So when I talk about mindset, and there's a lot of different places that you can go with it, but for me, and typically how I explain stuff is, I'm normally careful in what I say, but I'm more so that I don't want someone to misinterpret what I'm saying, So I try to kind of like know my audience and all, and kind
Mhm,
of put things in a way that they'll understand it, and
mhm,
then clarify as needed. But I will kind of approach it as, who are you? How do you think? What makes sense to you? And, you know, and then kind of you go through the things that you need to know and understand in terms of your mindset, like, like your self image, like I said earlier, having that sort of thing in there and creating that confidence within yourself and within your skill set, or your visualization skills, or just being, you know, having a goal in mind for, the match or
mhm,
whatever it is that you're doing. I'm taking and clarifying all that stuff at the forefront. And you can't necessarily just pick and choose, what somebody else does. You have to tailor it to yourself,
mhm,
because, like, there's not one way to do everything. You know, there's multiple ways to skin a cat, you know. you have to figure out how this stuff is going to work for you the best, how you understand it the best, how you can apply it consistently and repeatedly every single time. And a lot of people, whenever they start learning, like they read the Laney Basham books, or they there's another one by Ben Bergeron. That's a good one. It's kind of centered around CrossFit, but it really kind of goes into talking about the mindset, the stuff that I like. But you have to figure out how to tailor that stuff to who you are, how you understand things, what your life is like, what you're willing to do to get to whatever your goal is. And you have to put the effort in to do that. And most people won't put that effort in to do it. They just want to be able to do it, but they don't understand, they see the tip of the iceberg, but not all that's underneath it. So if you can ever, you know, resonate with them and get them to understand all of what it's going to take to do that, and really just get them to think about it for themselves, and then they're going to start having questions, and then that really gets their conversation going, and it engages their mind a whole lot more in the conversation and has their attention, pretty well peaked at that point. But that's tend to work pretty well for me.
It'd be helpful if I wasn't muted.
Oh no, it like froze for just seconds.
I tell you, there's another good book I'd recommend to people called The Ultra Mindset by Travis Massey. Fantastic book. He's a ultra runner and stuff like this, and I highly recommend that book if you haven't read it. But I think it's something that you can't really. You have to do hard things. You have to put yourself under time pressure. You have to risk and sacrifice and have self discipline. And from risk, embarrassment, and putting your stuff on the line, all those things come into play. We have at my little shooting group that we do every Thursday, we have the Big Dog Award that we give away. It's a little trophy. It's got a dog on it, so this gold trophy. And every Thursday at the end of our 2-hour session, we compete for the trophy.
Yeah.
And I think I've lost it once or twice, and every time I do, it's it rides right there in my truck with me, and we bring it back to the range on Thursday. But and then all right, here it goes. This is for the Big Dog Award at the end of the training session, and you better lace up your shoes because here we go. But I mean, you putting something on the line, even some bragging rights or a free meal or something where there's a little bit of loss and a little bit of tremble, and the video camera's rolling, and your buddies are going to rub your nose in your failure. Those are all important things. Doing things that really suck. I remember you're in Alabama, right?
Yes, sir.
What part of Alabama?
I'm at Northeast. Jacksonville's the name of the town I live in.
So I was in Montgomery, and I was training for a marathon. I've told this story on the show a couple of times, but it really was the moment that I found out what one of the ways I've been in combat by this point and all this stuff. I've been a cop, but it was one of those mornings that this is what it's all about. And I had a 16-mile run to do in Montgomery, Alabama, as a white guy, leaving early in the morning. And there are no good hotels in Montgomery, Alabama. They all suck.
Yes.
And I remember sitting, and it's raining too, Brady. And I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, man, I'm feeling sorry for myself, man. I got like tears coming down. Like, I don't want to do this, man. But my plan said, to your point about planning too, my plan said on Wednesday morning, you're going to run your 16-miler by yourself in the dark. And so there we go. I lace up my shoes and I get out and I run along the interstate in the dark, in the cold, in the rain by myself. It's just feeling sorry for myself the whole time because I had to get back, take a shower, put on my Marine Corps uniform, and be at the recruiting station there to do an inspection. So doing hard things, man, I can't say it enough. It'll build that steel mindset where you can, like, I get to win. You may not win. You may not get to come home today, but as a Christian man who is the shepherd of my family and they depend on me, they're going to win today, not you. So I kind of remove it's all about me and my ego to, hey man, it's about my granddaughter. She's coming home. You may not, but she's coming home. So whatever you got to do, I agree with you. Let's start there. But that's always such a nebulous topic, when you say mindset. Like, what does that mean? Can I read a book? And then I go, all right, read. That's it, buddy. I'm good to go.
Yeah, that's right. And I've done a lot of the similar things like what you're talking about there over the years, because like I primarily shoot single stack and all, and that's been a dying division for years,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And I hate it because I love my iron sights and I love my single stack guns. But that's what I remember it now. I'll remind me to go back on this, but this is what I was
Okay.
remember. In terms of the gear and how that stuff has changed over the years in terms of concealed carry versus your competition stuff. So one of the things that I thought about before, I wear contacts and have corrected vision and stuff. Have you ever gone out to the range and tried to shoot your firearm without your glasses on or some sort of corrected vision?
Can I tell a true story?
Yeah.
I've always had great vision. I'll make it quick. I always have great vision until I hit my mid to late 40s, right? So for the last 8 years, I can't shoot without I had my eye doctor make me some. So I had the little top bifocal.
Yeah.
So it's got my prescriptions top bifocal, where yesterday morning I forgot to put those on. So I'm rolling around with my normal ones, which help me see far, but I cannot see the sights. I mean, it's a blurry mess. And we were shooting for score with my little training group yesterday morning. And it's a build drill, and I pull the gun out and I can't see the side. I mean, it's just a blurry mess. I can't see anything. And I'm like, crap, And it's just grip the gun and pop, 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 pop. Let's see how it works out. But yeah, man, I have, and it's whoa.
It is an eye opener.
Yes, sir.
So I've done that whenever I think I was like 21 or something at the time when I did it the first time. And what I learned was if I don't have any corrective vision in, I have to have like a fiber optic front sight or something. That way I know where the front of the gun is if I'm doing iron sights. But even then, like, it's super hard to see a target, But what I learned is, having a red dot. If something happens, if you're in a fight with somebody and your glasses get knocked off, or somebody sticks their finger in your eye and you can't see out of it, or you yanks your contact out or something, like, that's what I've learned for me is it's a whole lot easier with a red dot, especially if you have to make a precise shot, because it's super hard to make a precise shot without your corrected vision in iron sights.
Mm-hmm.
But with that dot on there, it is so much easier to do. So like, I still carry iron sights a lot in majority of the time, but I've gotten to where I will carry a dot just because, like, if something wild like that does happen, I've got the best tools that I can have at that moment, to fight that adversity.
And I'm an iron sight guy. I tried it, and I'm going to play around with the dot again. I just haven't. I didn't see, to me, and there's a federal law enforcement group that we train a lot with, and their position is, not that they say this, I say this. It's a solution search for problem, because for the law enforcement community, don't get me wrong, because most of their fights are not there. And like when I went to Simon Gollub's class, I could hang with people until we got to the 20-yard line, and then their dot just ruled the day. I mean, I cannot shoot precise as they can with a dot with an open sight, but 20 yards in, no problem. 20 yards and out, it's a real legit problem. They're going to beat me every day. But for the average law enforcement officer, it's not that big a deal to use iron sights. And to your point about, I run a Dawson red fiber optic front on all my stuff, a real thin fiber optic front. So that was the savior. I could see the red fiber optic relative to the target, but I couldn't see the rear sights, was just a blurry mess. And I think we need to do that sometimes, don't you? Take those things off, handicap yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. And you talking about it too there. That's one thing that most people don't consider if they're running iron sights, especially for their carry gun, is like, if you have to shoot somebody from a distance like that, the amount of daylight that you have around your sights, especially if you need to be pretty precise, like a headshot, that's paramount.
Yes,
Like
sir.
for me, I like either like a 100 width or a 115 width front sight, and I like either like a 140 to a 150 rear notch in there, because like you can still have it aligned within the notch and still hit your target most time, but that gives you a little bit of daylight around it to just kind of see everything, compared to like, like a true glow, like a big dot sight or something like that.
And so if what Brady was saying, I'm giving you those numbers is basically I run a wide notch rear and a narrow as I can get fiber optic front because it gives me all that room to play with in there. I agree 100%. And I was the Secret Service was recently asking, why do you not run red dots on your guns, on your handguns? And somebody come back and said, well, the reason we don't is we have a no-fail mission. And if the dot goes down, it's, so we can't even risk the fact of that. Now you can get co-witness. I get it. And they're going to start fielding those either this year or next. But it is something to think about. Some agencies do a real good job. We were training with the Phoenix PD, and they have a real good red dot transition program that they put their officers through. And it's a really solid, I think it might be 3 days. It's legit, and they do a lot of really good training with it. Brady, I've kept you on here almost an hour and a half. If you're listening to today's show, I've got 3 or 4 different ways to contact Brady to be in. I've got his email on there. I've got his website on there. I've got his sponsor stuff on there. So if you can't remember what he's about to tell you, just go to the show notes page and click on the links there. But Brady, if someone did wanted to follow you, man, what do they need to do or train with you?
Just reach out to me. I typically don't like something I've learned through some other people's experience is you'll have a lot of people come to you and say, hey, I want to take a class with you. But you're like, okay, I'll put one together. And they don't really follow up on that, But if somebody wants to have a class, I'll let them kind of tell me, when they want to have it and all, but just reach out to me. You can shoot me a message in my email, Elite Performance LLC at iCloud.com, or you can hit me on Instagram or Facebook, or check out my website, kind of see some of the stuff that I offer or anything like that. And that's the thing too, like I've got just kind of some generalized courses and stuff on my website that kind of just lays out, various different things, but really kind of cater it to whatever you want to be.
Well, it's been a great opportunity catching up with you this morning, Brady, and jawing with you for a while and getting your experience and training methodology. I really appreciate you being on, sir.
I really appreciate you having me. It's been fun. Love catching up with you.
Yeah, well, tell Matt I said howdy down there, and we'll get you back on soon, Brady.
Absolutely. We'll see you, bro.
All right, guys, be safe out there because the fight is coming. You got to be ready.